In this video I'm going to be replacing a wheel hub assembly on this 2003 GMC Sierra Z71 4x4. Alright, to get started I'm going to safely lift the front end of the vehicle up and secure it with jack stands. I'd like to note that I'm going to be using an impact wrench to remove the hub nut that's located behind this little hubcap. If I didn't have the impact wrench, I would want to loosen that nut right now while the truck's on the ground, because once you get the wheel off and the brakes off, it won't be easy holding the hub still using a regular socket wrench. But you'll see later that the impact wrench just zips it right off. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is remove the caliper, and to get that off you need to remove the star bit. It is a Torx T55. This is an odd numbered Torx bit. Most little Torx bit kits go to 50, or they skip 55. They goes from 50 to 60 like mine did, so this is just an AutoZone T55 Torx. I'm going to remove this caliper with this Torx bit. Alright, with the breaker bar and some elbow grease, I got these caliper bolts out. Okay, to remove the caliper, I'm going to compress the piston a little bit, make it a little easier to come off. That should make that a little easier to get off. There you go. Okay, now we gotta remove the caliper bracket. There are two 18mm bolts that are holding this on. I just lightly tapped around the face of the rotor right here. Finally broke that loose, so we're good there. Now we're going to take this dust cap off and remove the axle nut. Alright, I'm using a flathead screwdriver and I've been hitting on this with a hammer. To remove my hubcap. Now we got to remove the axle nut. Okay, axle nuts off. Now we're ready to remove the bolts that hold the actual hub into place. There's a ABS sensor. I gotta get a 5mm Allen wrench to remove that little screw, and then this thing comes off. Alright, I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting these hub nuts out. They're 15mm. Alright, so I started off using my box end 15mm on these three. I just used another box end wrench and use that as leverage. So my box end wrench was rounding the nut off. It's got all these little teeth in here. So I went and found a 15mm socket that's shaped like this, so it would grab the side walls and not necessarily the corners like this does. Got the front end of the truck jacked up off the ground. I've turned the spindle and got a long extension and a 15mm socket, and I'm getting this lower bolt out. Alright, so I've turned the wheel to the left now, and I've got a 15mm socket and a breaker bar. I've got enough room now, I can spin that off. This one here is going to be tough because I'm going to be bumping into this ball joint bolt. Okay, now I've gotten the top, broken it loose. I've got this small 15mm socket and a long extension with the breaker bar, and thankfully it just fits underneath that bolt. I'll take the breaker bar off and then use my socket wrench to get it all the way out. This socket's going to want to bump into the axle, so what I may end up needing to do is use my box end wrench to get that bolt all the way out. Alright, now I've got my 5mm Allen wrench. I'm getting this Allen screw out of here. This is the wheel speed sensor, so this is going to have to come out. Alright, you can see that this wheel speed sensor is actually broken. Those copper wires are not supposed to be exposed. They're actually covered in a black plastic, which is actually, if you look closely, stuck in the hub. It's broken off. So this is the reason why we're changing the hub in the first place. This broken wheel speed sensor was causing unwanted ABS at very low speeds, so we're just replacing the whole hub. I'm gonna take a hammer and hit on it and try to get this hub to come off. You can see that the axle is moving freely in there, so this should just come right off with some taps of a hammer.
You serious?
Okay, I have had the absolute awfulest time trying to get this hub off, and I finally got it broken loose. I beat on it 3 ways from Friday trying to get this thing just to come out, but it wouldn't come out, so I ended up having to use my noggin and come up with some redneck ingenuity, thus this bolt you see right here. To get the bolt in there, I knocked out the lug with a hammer. They're just pressed in, they pop right out. Putting a wrench on the nut and putting a socket on the end of the bolt, twisting that down, holding the nut, it actually used physics to pry the hub clear off the spindle there. So you'll see that this bolt, the threads don't go up very far on this bolt. So what I ended up doing was putting my hammer between the end of the bolt and the face of the spindle there. Doing that helped me utilize the threads on the bolt. If the threads went all the way up to the top of the bolt, I wouldn't have had to use my hammer, but I just use it as a spacer to help pry the hub off of the spindle. And what do you know? Good old redneck ingenuity worked. It sure beat whacking on it with a hammer like a caveman.
There's always something to remind me of another.
So I'm gonna take some time, clean out this hub area, and I'm gonna have to take this wheel speed sensor off and replace it with the new one. All right, I just took some time and I wired brushed all the surfaces to get a lot of that scale and rust off of it. You can see this is that top bolt. I can't get it to come all the way out because it runs into everything back there. But anyway, we're ready to install the new hub. I still have to get rid of this wheel sensor because the new hub has a new one. But we're going to go ahead and install the new hub. I've got some anti-seize lubricant. I'm going to kind of put it on the surfaces here and on the inside of here, just so this will be a little easier to get out the next time somebody needs to replace it. The new part is a Moog wheel bearing hub assembly. It's part 515036. I got this off of rockauto.com. So I've got just a little bit of anti-seize lubricant on the hub. I'm going to go ahead and fish this wire through this brake guard right here. Set it right here on the end of the hub and then install the hub this way. Okay, there we go. Got my axle through there. I'm going to go ahead and just sling this nut on here real quick so my hub doesn't go flying off. I'll go ahead and start spinning this upper bolt with my fingers to try to get it started. So I cleaned off the other 2 bolts with the wire brush, put a little anti-seize lubricant on there as well. I'm going to go ahead and fish these in and start tightening these down by hand. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this wheel speed sensor in. I'm going to go through and disconnect it where the other one is. And this actually is a harness, like a pigtail plug-in right here at the top. So I'm going to take these 2 out, fish this new one in, snap it into its place with these provided clips, and install that wire. Alright, you'll see here that I should have used a screwdriver and just opened the clip and put the new wire down in the existing clip. But I used a pair of pliers like an idiot and broke the post off the old clip. Now I can't get the new clip post down in there because it's got the old one stuck in it.
Look what you did, you little jerk!
So, what are you gonna do? Alright, it's a little tricky because there's some plastic clips, but the old wire is off. Pigtail's plugged in. So now I guess I'm ready to torque down the hub bolts. And then we're going to tighten down the axle nut. We won't torque it down until it's down on the ground under its own weight. Then we'll torque it down. We're going to torque these bolts down to 75 foot-pounds each. Alright, now I'm going to tighten up my hub nut with this 35mm socket. I'm not going to tighten this hub nut all the way down until it's on the ground under its own weight. Then I'll torque it to spec. Now it's time to reinstall the brake components. Just a little tip that I like to do is I put a lug nut on the rotor to keep it in place. I'm going to torque down these 18mm caliper bolts to 75 foot-pounds. Alright, Alright, now I'm going to be reinstalling the brake pads. I put a little brake lubricant on the pads themselves and on the slides. That way it just kind of reduces any squeaks. Then I'll put on the caliper, and I'll put a little bit of that same brake lubricant on the slide bolts, just to kind of keep things lubricated and keep the squeaks down. Alright, I'm ready to put the wheel back on, but before I do, I'll go ahead and give everything a good quick clean. Alright, now the truck's down, I'm going to go ahead and tighten these lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds in a crossing pattern. Now I'm going to tighten the hub nut to 125 foot-pounds. Alright, now I'm going to replace the hubcap. Well, there you have it. That's how I replaced the wheel hub assembly on this 2003 GMC Sierra. Really wasn't too hard of a job. I found out pretty quickly that beating on that hub with a hammer wasn't going to get the job done. So getting that bolt and using some physics to pry the hub away from the spindle ended up doing the trick. In all, I spent about $125 and about an hour and a half of my time to get the job done.